everybody. Welcome to A Word with Kelly Scott Reed. Today we have with us, and I'm very excited about this, Sebastian Vice, the founder of Outcast Press and author of Homo Mortalis. Welcome, Sebastian. Thank you so much for joining us. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I suppose, what would you like to know? Because it's a really kind of broad question. So what aspect?
How about anything you feel comfortable telling us?
Yeah. So obviously that's not my real name. It's too, in my opinion, it's too cool of a name to be my real name. Very, yeah. So, I run Outcast Press. I'm not the editor there, but I do found it. I do PR for it and acquisitions and all of the kind of the more mundane type stuff. But I get to interact with a lot of, cool people. In my writing life, let's see, I'm sort of one of those weird people that, I don't know if it's weird, but it's a certain kind of writer that I have to have some kind of a feeling in order to write. Like I have to have some kind of pain or trauma. Like if something happens, like I'm in really severe pain, that's when I write. I can't write, like comfortability is going to kill any kind of creativity that I have. Like I wrote a piece when I had sciatic nerve pain and it was just fucking god awful. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to write now because it gives that sense of immediacy, that sense of, how do I put it? Like, if you ever read a book, there's many of them out there where the author drones on and on about and on.
Yeah.
I just like every line to just boom, 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 boom. Like every line should sing. Everything should. I don't want to see a long description of a woman's dress. Who gives a fuck? I want to just hit me with the emotion, get right in there. Like every line, every word should be interrogated. And I'm not saying I do it perfectly, but it makes it a little bit harder just because like I don't want to waste the reader's time. So
this may be why you spoke to me. I'm going to mention your book, Homo Mortalis. Marianne and I were talking a little bit about it today. We were pretty shocked with how honest you write. Sometimes, like you're just saying, and I can go either way. I like some description and I like very plain speech as well. But sometimes we can get lost. The emotion and the feeling gets lost behind flowery words or overly descriptive things. And I think both of us felt, I'm speaking for you, Marianne, but felt that it was hitting us and packing a wallop with its honesty. It was almost shocking at how it read. And that's a good thing. That's not shocking in that I was appalled or anything like that. It was that, wow, I really feel like I'm going through something that you've gone through in real time. And I don't know if that's your intention, but it felt very much that way to me. And I loved it. And I think I wrote something to you today going, wow, I'm reading this and it's kind of hitting me really hard. There's some heartbreak here. But I'm sorry, I just hijacked you. But I just wanted to let you know that was when you were talking about that plain language and honest language, that you do use that effectively.
Yeah. I don't know if I have any intent on, how do I put, like, I don't know if I have any intent on, the emotion is the most important thing for me. And how I get there, it doesn't matter how one gets there as long as you get there. And yeah, here's a confession, is I don't really know anything about poetry structure. I just don't. I don't know anything. In fact, until like 5 years ago, I actually hated poetry because most of what I was exposed to was, for lack of a better word, like pretentious dick sucking. like the T.S. Eliot. Like, if you ever read like The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot, where you have to have like 3 fucking PhDs to understand what he's fucking talking about? Fuck that. So I thought that that's how you had to write poetry. And yeah, you use these, and in that case, it sounds like, are you trying to sound smart? Is that what? Because that's not. I don't think that should be the goal of a writer, is to sound smart. I think it should be to get their message across. And if you're confusing, so that's why I write very sort of straightforward, right? Straight to the point. And I'm, within most pieces, I'm very much in the work, if that makes sense. Like, you know how you read some authors and you're like, oh, you can separate them, their worldview sort of from the work. That's not me. Like, if you read Thomas Ligotti, you see him in his work. If you read Lovecraft, you can see that this is how he thinks about the world. If you read, I'm trying to think of other people, where those are the people that I resonate with, because they're very much sort of tattooed to the work, and that, and sort of it bleeds through, and it's not abstracted away. But yeah, so that's how I think some of the people I sent it to, they said it was emotionally draining. That's what they said, it was emotionally draining, just because, yeah, I mean, I pull no punches, and also I think, like, I don't care about awards, I don't care about accolades, but I think we all have that one book, story, poem, movie that came to us at the right time in our life and made us feel less alone. Like, we were in a really bad way, and it spoke to us at just the right time. And so I guess that's my hope, is that maybe it'll let other people be more open. I mean, so I guess maybe subconsciously why I wrote it the way I did, not to drone on, is to give other people permission to say, no, it's okay to be extremely in your face, honest about what you went through. Because given my personality and given what I write, I hear people confide in me, and you would be shocked by the stuff that I talked about was nothing compared to what some people, and again, I'm not going to reveal any names, but on more than one occasion, and I've told these people, I said, you should write this down, because this has happened on 3 different occasions where it was a very similar story. And it took me by surprise, not because I'm deluded. I know human depravity. I know that there's a level of human depravity that I've seen it. But in casual conversation, just brought up by 3 different women that when they were younger, their mothers pimped them out for drugs. Just thrown in there, just casual. Wait, I mean, I had to say, hang on a minute now, wait. And like, oh, did we shock you? No, you didn't shock me by the content. You shocked me by how casual it was. Like,
right.
Fucked up. Like, that's, and so maybe it's just a way of giving people permission to go through their life and say, hey, kid, or hey, person, you're not alone, or it's okay. You know, here's permission to acknowledge this part of you that happened, and that life broke you in certain ways, and that's not your fault, and kind of be very vulnerable, because that's how you grow, learn.
Yeah. And it's interesting you're saying that, because the first question we were talking about prior to recording, that brings me to you say the casualness of the language that they used. And the first question is, when is the first time that you realized language had power? And you said so many interesting things. So I really want to hear you answer that question.
I think, when did I first realize it has power? I don't know when I first, I mean, I kind of don't think it does in a way. I think that what we do is, I mean, actions speak louder than words. I remember I had a professor and she says, talk is cheap. So in a way, I'm inclined to say they don't, but in another way, I think that they're used. I think that there is a power in how sorry, I might offend some of you with what I'm about to say, but with the kind of bourgeois upper middle class people that like to bludgeon people over the head with civility to hide brutality. That's how I think it's got power, right? So for instance, have you ever, I mean, I'll give you a really good example. So I was watching a documentary on Flint, Michigan, and how their governor did his pipeline and the lead poisoning, right? Something like 10,000 kids died, many other people permanently damaged. So he was at this town hall. Now, is it safe to assume many of you, have children, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So suppose somebody poisoned your kid, right? Through negligence and knowing negligence, and you had a town hall to confront that person, you'd be pretty angry, right?
Yeah.
All right. So this piece of shit, I forget what his name is. He's like, I thought we were going to have a civil discussion here. But that's where language has power, is because he can hide behind civility, like, look at these plebeians. They're not treating me with respect. I only poison their kids, but they're not talking to me right. I think that's where it has power too. And I think it also has power in this really goofy notion. And I don't know if this is when I first realized it, but at least recently, where a lot of places don't like, is that as a people, we are profoundly confused on, we confuse symbols for action, right? So, and we don't want to offend. Again, I would say, if I had to speculate, it would probably be upper middle class white people.
I want to get back to your writing for a moment. What would you consider your writing kryptonite?
What do you mean by that?
Something that stops you from being creative, from being a writer, something that really halts your process, if there is one.
I think, if anything, it's just like maybe the day-to-day stresses of life. But besides that, which, I mean, everybody's got that, I think it's what halts it is like, but this is not just writing, this is sort of life in general, I would say, would be those periods when I sink into a kind of deep existential depression, or even worse, when those periods where I've been in just raptured by anhedonia. Have you heard of anhedonia? What anhedonia is?
No.
It's hard to explain it to someone who's never experienced it, but anhedonia would be like an utter lack of motivation for anything, even to make you want, even to conceive of wanting to do something. It's that dark, it's that deep of a hole. So you may desire it, but you just don't, those motivational structures just don't function. So it would be like the the psychological equivalent of being deaf, blind, and mute. You're just emotionally off the scale of being numb, right? But it's a weird feeling that I hope you most people don't have to go through. So I think that's what it is. But once I get started, yeah, it's just sticking with it. I think nothing really stops it except my own flirtations with madness, which anybody who's a writer is they have that, right? They come real close to madness, and if you're lucky, you don't go over the precipice, and if you're unlucky, then you go into that abyss, and you know.
Do you think that when you write, that stops you from going into the abyss? Is that part of a process for you?
I forget who said this. Was it Anne Leibovitz maybe said this? I think it was her. I write so I don't kill people.
I love that so much. My coworkers and our editor-in-chief and lead editor all know that I do a lot so I don't kill people.
Right? It's right. It's so like if somebody does me wrong, somebody like they're gonna make it into a piece of mine in some form or other. The name's gonna be changed, but they're gonna make it in. They're gonna make it in. I mean, so I don't know if it helps. I mean, I've always heard of like writing as therapeutic. I've never found it to be that way. And if anything, it's made me all the more weird. It's just made me more, you go down certain internet rabbit holes and you research stuff, and especially if you write the kind of stuff I do, it can take a toll on you, right? You take a beating to your soul when you look up certain things, and probably my FBI files gets larger every day because they're like, what's he looking up now? Can't figure me out. So,
if you weren't writing, what would you do to express your creativity? If it was like you couldn't write, what would be an outlet for you creatively besides that?
I think writing and directing movies would be fun, but that's I mean, that's the publishing industry is sleazy enough, so that's sort of off the table. And it's just, I mean, you saw how uncomfortable. Did you see when the latest one, when Ricky Gervais was roasting all the people at the whatever? You saw how uncomfortable it was there, right?
Yeah, love Ricky Gervais.
Yeah, all those people there, right? They all have blood on their hands in one way or another, right? They all had to look the other way while, because they were getting cut a check from, either Jeffrey Epstein or who's that one disgusting guy?
Harvey Weinstein
Weinstein, yeah. And they're like, yeah, they all had to sort of look the other way, and they all could pretend like they weren't, but give me a fucking break. You all knew what he was doing. You all knew. So yeah, Hollywood is, I mean, especially now, in like an ideal world, if I could do film, that would be wonderful. If I didn't have to, but I just don't have the energy to have to be that sleazy. Music would be another thing. Like I flirted for a while. I've told this story other places. When I was really young, like 19, I played bass for a very short period of time. But that ended badly. I ended up fighting one of the guys because he was Well, we were auditioning for a lead singer, and he was kept hitting on her, and you could tell she was like very uncomfortable. And I was like, listen, guy, like, get laid on your own fucking time. Like, we're here to do right. Like, yeah, we're here to we're like here to do a creative endeavor. Like, and he's just kept doing, and you could tell she was uncomfortable. And I think I was like 19, 20. I forget. Like, I was doing, the memory back then can be a bit because, doing drugs and stuff. But yeah, I ended up just getting into a fight with him and they kicked me out. So, I mean, if I could go back in time, but like at this stage in my life, it's like, music's sort of out, movies are out. So yeah, I guess ride this till the wheels come off until.
Yes. Well, honestly, it wouldn't be a band if the bass player and the lead singer weren't punching each other out. That's just from my experience. From my personal experience, I can tell you, it just wouldn't be a band.
Tell me about your experience. Do you have experience with this?
Yes, I actually do. My husband is the lead singer in a band. Okay. And he's been in this band they're having their 25th anniversary this in 2 weeks. Wait, no, a week. Yeah. It's coming up. And that's how I met him. I do a little songwriting with him for the band. But in all creative endeavors where there's a group, there's friction over creative control, personalities, because they're so passionate about what they're doing. They all really are. They all have this vision. And there is, that's why I'm joking. It just wouldn't be a band without conflict between it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's cool. I quickly realized, creatively, that's also another thing. Creatively, I don't really work super well with others. I can kind of, but I'm better off working alone. Even though I do sometimes collaborate, I have to just go into it and know I'm going to have to make a lot of, how shall we say, sacrifices, in that, like, I'm going to want to drive the car off the cliff, and they're going to be like, no, we just want to get close to the cliff. And I'm going to go, nah, I want to go right off the cliff and crash and burn. Like, we're going to go all the way. So, yeah.
That's awesome. And now, is there any part of the actual writing? First of all, some people don't have a writing process. Like, I don't have a writing process. So this is a question that you can say, I don't have any answer to. What is the hardest part of your process of writing for you? If there was one.
Yeah. I don't enjoy it. So that's going to come as the first shock, which for those of you that are shocked by that, the great horror writer Thomas Ligotti says the same thing. He says he likes the finished product, but the actual process he does not like.
Really interesting.
So the actual process, I like it to be done, and I like to look back on it and say, oh, that's good. But it's really excruciating. And I'm not saying this is like to gain sympathy, because people can say, well, do something else. So I'm not saying, it's just, I like when it's done, or I guess I like the moments when the pieces sort of fall in. Like, I mean, certainly all of you have been in that spot, I'm sure, where there was something that wasn't quite working. Maybe in a piece you had written, like, it was like 95% of it was working, but there was one piece of the puzzle and you couldn't quite pin down what was wrong. But then you found it and you're like, that's what it is. That's what ties this all together. Or if I add this line, it could just be a simple line or a simple transition or a simple extra something or other that makes it work. Actually, I forgot what your question was. What was your question?
No, you're answering it. What is the hardest part of your process, if there is a process?
Oh, yeah.
And you're just kind of explaining what you enjoy about it too.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess the hardest part would probably be being as accurate as possible. Because I try to, I mean, how I write is, and I'm not saying I'm always going to succeed at it, but I try to be as accurate to the characters in the time period as possible, down to even like I obsess over some of the, so I guess that's where it gets, like, if I'm, how do I put it? So I'm writing a story right now, a longer piece about incels right now. And it's set in 1997. And so and it's about this kid who's completely self-absorbed in himself. He's kind of a Patrick Bateman from American Psycho type person that drones on. Kind of annoyingly drones on and on about his fashion taste, because that's the kind of character he is, very shallow, very shallow and whatever. And so I wanted to be like, well, I couldn't just pick out any old suit. But if I look up nice suits, no. I want to know what was popular in 1997. And I want to know what the price is, so I know if it's in his price range. So it's just minor stuff like that. Or, so I guess it's a lot of the research, but down to like the nitty gritties of getting it so that while most people could gloss over that, I want somebody who's, let's say, if I'm writing about firemen, which I really haven't much yet, a fireman or woman could pick that up and say, oh, yeah, that tracks. And maybe that's obsessive on my part, but it's just, I have a commitment to, or I try my best to have a commitment to authenticity and honesty and being true to that time period. Dialogue is not hard for me in terms of writing it, but I try to take really good care with it, because I want to write how people talk. So I try, and if you do that, you're going to notice there's a lot of stumbling and interrupting and whatnot. So I try to go over my dialogue. This is actually something that a trick. This is a trick that I picked up, and this really elevated a piece of mine. I picked this up from Craig Clevenger. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Craig Clevenger.
No,
he wrote the Contortionist Handbook, which is a fantastic book. It's out of print right now, but if you get your hands on it, I highly recommend it. He has an article where he suggests you write descriptions separate from dialogue, and in between you put just little markers, just little tags. And then what you try to do is you see how the dialogue relates to let's say the paragraph before and the paragraph after, and you even put in there what your intent is with the dialogue, right? Is the intent to ask a question? Is the intent to incite? Is it a power play move? So I did that, where I wrote all the descriptions with just dialogue tags. And then I went back in there and I noticed it was more snappy. It was more, or at least it was reported to me that it was. So that was a trick that I found it can be tedious, but it works well.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I think all we have left is what are you working on that you'd like to announce, that you'd like to have out there for people to look forward to?
I have several things in the works. So besides my poetry book, and I don't know if you had questions about that or not. I don't know if you wanted to return back to that or.
No, we didn't have any questions. This is really kind of about you and you getting your stuff out there. I actually thought it was pretty, and this isn't saying that it's simple. That's not what I'm saying. I understood what you were writing, so I didn't have a lot of questions. And I don't know,
Yeah.
Marianne, please feel free. You didn't either. We were both really just more moved by how right between the eyes it hits you. We've had a line, Marianne, and I promise I'll email with this to you once. There was a couple of lines that we read aloud that were really like, oh, like hit you right where it hurt. In a good way, in a way that kind of makes you confront what you don't want to look at
Yeah.
directly. So there was really, that's the good part about it. I didn't have a lot of questions because I really kind of understood what you were trying to say. I feel I did, and I hope with what I'm saying to you, it sounds like I understand.
Yeah.
But yeah, just go ahead and plug away. What are you working on?
Yeah. So what I'm working on several things currently. I'm putting together depending on what pieces get accepted and don't, and what the potential, I can't emphasize that enough, the potential contract will say about when I can use these. I'll eventually put together a hybrid collection of short stories and poetry. So ideally, I've got it planned out for 20 poems I'll have, along with 20 short stories. So that'll probably be, if all goes as planned, sometime 2023. Right now, what I'm working on is, as a reference point, have any of you read Roland Tolper's The Tenant?
No.
How do you feel
Did you
about
guys?
spoilers? Yeah, how do you feel about spoilers? Because in order for me to
I don't
explain,
know. Ask the audience.
yeah, so
There's
I
other
guess
people that might care about spoilers, not just me. There's a lot of people are
yeah,
going to watch this, I hope.
yeah. Okay, so I mean, this is the part where you'd probably want to pause for a couple minutes if you care about spoilers. In order for me to explain this novella I'm
Okay.
working on,
Okay.
it's piggybacking
So
off of.
Warner, got it. Spoiler alert, warning.
So in Roland Tolper's The Tenant, the best part of that piece for me was it's this kind of claustrophobic novella of this guy who moves into an apartment. I think Roman Polanski made a film after it, I believe, but I haven't seen the movie. And it ends with him eventually jumping from his apartment in an attempted suicide. He survives, but he's still able to like walk around, and everybody's watching, and he kind of like smears him with blood, runs back up the stairs, and jumps again. And then he kind of wakes up or it's implied that he wakes up in the hospital. And if you read the book, you wonder, like, holy shit, is he kind of caught in this time loop thing that you're not quite sure? It's a kind of and so what I wanted to do was, that only takes about 5 pages. So what I wanted to do is stretch that out and say, no, that's where the good stuff is. I want a piece where it starts with the guy jumping from a building, from his apartment building. He survives. His lower back's broken, his legs are broken, and he claws his way back up 5 flights of stairs to do it again. And so mixed within there is going to obviously be sort of what all the events that transpired that led him to that, kind of starting at the beginning. So this is me trying to be as fancy as I can. So like ascent of the first floor will be like childhood, ascent of the second floor kind of teenage, early adulthood, and then so on and so forth, right? So that's what it's going to be. It's going to be brutal. It is so far nihilistic, pessimistic. If you read Homo Mortalis, you'll see a lot of the same themes in there. Working on that. As far as other pieces, that's about it. I mean, I've got a couple longer like novelettes that I'm working on for the short story collection. One is this longer epistolary incel story that I kind of modeled it after. Have you read No Longer Human?
No, I'm the most unwell read person seems to be on the planet because I've read none of these.
And so I read more obscure stuff. I read more like obscure stuff. So it's okay if you were to throw at me like have you read this, I'd probably say no, because like I read obscure.
Let me try. I'm going to try you on that because I think you're wrong. I think you're going to know this. Have you ever read Geek Love? Geek Love by Catherine Dunn.
That's a classic transgressive fiction novel. That's one of the greats. Yeah.
It's my favorite book. I knew you would know it. I have no doubt you would know it. It's one of my favorite books of all time. It's incredible. Thank you so much. You're so interesting, so much fun to talk to. And I appreciate you reaching out. That was really awesome of you. I can't wait to see what you have coming in the future. Honestly, you sound like you have some really great ideas. Thank you so much for being with us.
Oh yeah, no, thank you for having me on. Can I do a final sort of confession? Can I do a final confession?
Sure, go for it.
When I hit you up, I was like, I wonder what these nice women are gonna think about me. That's what I thought. I was like, these women seem like they're so nice, and I'm gonna like bombard them with all my fucked up whatever.
No way.
I thought was like, I'm like, well, I'm gonna take a shot. I've been rejected before, but that's the first thing. I'm just like, then when you said yes, I'm just like, oh, they're gonna, yeah. So just my confession, I wasn't nervous about it, but I was just like, this could go off the rails real quick. So.
We go off the rails really quick. We do.
And another thing, something that I think is worth noting is that in spite of being nice, which we're very kind people. I think that shows through all the time. I think that's why we've had the reception that we have on Twitter, and for being relative newbies, people seem to have warmed to us quite a bit.
Oh yeah.
But I will say that for myself personally, especially, I know Kelly and I have very similar tastes in things. The more raw and the more real that it is, the more I like it. That tends to be how I write.
Good.
And that's just kind of my wavelength. So it's definitely cool to talk to someone who doesn't necessarily feel the need to dress the work up the way that some people do to make it appear. I know you made the reference to, trying to sound smart, or just to distill it to this very MFA kind of standard that I know people feel that pressure in the industry. I don't care for that personally. So you were not barking up the wrong tree.
No, not at all. And the great thing about our little group of people is we are very different women. And one of the reasons we work really well together is we have a similar vein. We're kind, but what we like is very different. And that's a good thing for a press, because then you get a wide variety of things. But I would say we all have a penchant for the unusual. All three of us like the unusual. There was nothing about your writing that felt you were trying to prove a point, like you said, to sound smart or to sound like you had to explain it in 50 different ways. We could get through your language and your words, we got your point. I mean, I think and an understanding of where you're coming from, which is a really great thing. So yeah, I really thank you for coming. It looks like we're off recording. But thank you so much for coming. I apologize